Welcome to World News with Philip Cameron Roth. Please subscribe for updates and content, and make sure to hit that bell for notifications. Recently, Iran has labeled the U.S. military as a terrorist organization in response to the government's accusation that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is a terrorist organization itself. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. But what exactly constitutes a terrorist? According to Our World in Data, the definition is fuzzy at best. But I think most would agree an organization that engages in the murder of innocent civilians for political and strategic reasons would be nominees for this title. Noam Chomsky reports that 90% of deaths by U.S. military drone attacks are casualties having absolutely nothing to do with terrorism. So it definitely appears that the Iranians' claims are substantiated. And many of these could be intentional when you consider the videos and documents leaked by Chelsea Manning. Only time will tell, but I fear this is in preparation for another U.S.-led preemptive war in the Middle East. And don't be misled by claims of this being merely a defensive strategy to combat terrorist attacks in the U.S. I'm presenting a graph from the same article by Our World in Data, and it shows clearly that the U.S. death rate is pretty much zero. And when you compare that to the rest of the world, we really have nothing to complain about. Now, I'd like to move on to Cambodian news, considering that's where I live. And I'd like to talk about the sanctions in Cambodia. And I'd like to question who really gets hurt by sanctions, and what are the motives behind sanctions. Now, currently the EU is pulling out of the EBA agreement for perceived human rights violations. This is designed to put pressure on the government to free Kem Sokha and reinstate the CNRP as a political party. But where is the pressure going to be held? By the government or by common Cambodian working people? Let's make one thing clear. Hun Sen and the CPP have won consistently in elections. No NGO can point to any alleged voting fraud that would change that outcome. Secondly, there is much evidence to bring a case against Kem Sokha. For example, Kem Sokha expressed in a speech that he was being aided by foreign experts in the U.S. in order to change the government using the Yugoslavia method. The Yugoslavia method is clearly destructive, and that claim is sufficient to warrant an investigation at the very least. Members of the U.S. Embassy can say over and over again that the claims of him conspiring with the U.S. government are quote-unquote absurd, but it does not change the fact that they have no reasonable explanation for the entire speech that he gave. Furthermore, if someone in Western politics claimed to have worked with foreign experts to change the nation's government in a disastrous way, they would be in custody as well. Therefore, these sanctions being about outlined human rights abuses are baseless. Currently, the U.S. is now in support of a coup to take over the Venezuelan government. The general public is starting to want that as well. But what led to this and why? Venezuela's economy primarily runs on the profits of their nationalized oil sales. Hence, when the price of oil fell, their economy faced a hardship. But instead of giving foreign aid at that time, the U.S. implemented tougher sanctions. This made the already bad situation even worse, and now the people of Venezuela are looking to the U.S. as heroes, when in fact they were one of the villains. They helped exasperate the country's problems to the point where people began to starve. This pattern of sanctions, funding of protests, and coup has been used throughout modern history in order for the U.S. and other Western nations to gain power and influence throughout the world. Sadly, it looks like this pattern of action will be effective in Venezuela. What's also upsetting is that the WJP, World Justice Project, recently put Cambodia second to last place ahead of Venezuela regarding living conditions and human rights. This is the same ranking they got from the preceding year. To me, this is a red flag. In Venezuela, people are starving to death, and there are ongoing bloody, violent, and lethal protests and riots. When looking at Cambodia and Venezuela next to other nations, like Liberia, for example, it's simply comparing apples to oranges. The two don't even come close. Currently, the EU, with the support of the U.S., has now passed sanctions in this nation, but this is not designed for their claimed intended government targets. Rather, it will affect the most vulnerable of the Cambodian public. This is a tactic. They want to make you desperate by crumbling your economy in order to step in as the human rights heroes they claim to be, all while hiding the fact that they helped orchestrate a disaster. Luckily, it's a feeble attempt. Cambodia has support from China, Japan, Korea, and Russia, whom all have vested interests in the nation. As long as the government can help keep the peace from possible Soros-funded U.S. protests, those countries will take advantage of the opportunity and continually strengthen the ties of these nations with Cambodia. Simply put, the stronghold that the U.S. once had on the world is weakening, yet they are too delusional to see this. They want a foothold in this area, just as they attempted to attain one during the Vietnam War. Unfortunately, because of that war, they lost money, lives, time, and any chance of upholding a long-lasting positive reputation in Southeast Asia. The Cambodian people mustn't get duped. It's too late for the Venezuelans. Oil profits will soon go to the rich and powerful, and while the puppet regime of Juan Guaido will take control undemocratically, the people will be powerless and in a more disastrous situation. It most likely will become a Western corporate-led failed dictatorship. Remember, their claims of Cambodian violated human rights are baseless, and they have no qualms about disregarding humanity either. It's time to admire the nations that help in developing nations such as Cambodia, instead of the ones that could care less if they cause pain and suffering. Now lastly, I'd like to talk about American entertainment news. Owen Benjamin's recently entitled "Proof That Ben Shapiro is Worse Than Hitler" video has been flagged by YouTube. While it's a cathartic post that went into depth about chicken hawks, such as Ben Shapiro, manipulating young men into war, it was used as an excuse to blame the Jews for censorship. However, a little-known Jewish podcaster by the name of Charles Moskowitz has also been censored by YouTube in the past. His video is entitled "Debunking 3 Jewish Conspiracies." Clearly not anti-Semitic by any stretch of the imagination. So with these Jewish conspiracies, they just do not hold up over time. And that's clearly evident when you look at all of the banned videos on YouTube. So, that's the news for today and for tonight for me. I hope you enjoyed, and please stay tuned for future updates. Thank you.